The United States Senate just officially passed the highly controversial 21st Century Road to Housing Act, and look at how fast the mainstream financial media is rushing to spin this news before the House of Representatives takes their vote. People on one side of the political aisle are literally throwing parties shouting that this is the absolute end of predatory corporate landlords. They want you to believe that institutional giants are officially banned from owning single-family homes and that their business models are completely ruined. They are screaming that the working class is finally sticking it to Wall Street and that the administration has magically solve the housing affordability crisis. But then you look at the exact opposite side of the aisle, and the rhetoric is completely filled with massive economic anxiety. Those commentators are warning that if this aggressive legislation actually becomes law, we are going to see a catastrophic drop in total rental inventory. They claim that suppressing institutional buyers will crush the overall supply of rental properties, which will instantly force consumer rents to skyrocket. Those are the two loud emotional RG humans dominating your social media feeds right now, but we do not do emotional speculation on this channel. In this video, I am going to deliver the cold, hard mathematical facts about what actually just went down behind closed doors in Washington. I am going to show you exactly how this heavily publicized bill just got completely gutted by political amendments before the ink was even dry. The reality is that this isolation is not going to have a single ounce of the progressive impact that is currently being advertised on television, fortunately for you, because you had the financial intelligence to hit the subscribe button on this channel. You are going to get the actual data. You are going to possess the deep institutional insight you need to completely see through the smoke and mirrors when people talk about this market. Let us stop the mindless guessing and look directly at the actual timeline of how this legislative mess developed over the last few months. The United States Senate originally passed their version of the 21st Century Road to Housing Act back in March of 2022. It was a remarkably clean vote that sailed through the chamber with an 89-10 bipartisan majority. Politicians from both sides of the aisle were practically tripping over themselves to put their names on this bill to score cheap political points. But inside that original Senate text was a highly aggressive provision known as the Elizabeth Warren Amendment. That specific clause was designed to stop massive institutions from completely outbidding everyday families for standard suburban housing, but the politicians still wanted to make sure they did not accidentally stop massive home builders from creating brand new rental communities. So they wrote a rule stating that if an institutional entity owns more than 350 individual properties, they can still buy houses. But the catch was that the government would legally force that corporation to completely sell the asset after 7 years of ownership. The bill also included a mandate giving the current tenant an exclusive first look to buy the property during the first 30 days it hits the market. Now let us take a quick sidebar on that specific tenant first look provision, because from a pure real estate perspective, it is actually a decent framework. Giving a tenant the immediate option to purchase the home they already live in can drastically lower transaction costs. For both parties, the seller can easily save thousands of dollars on standard agent commissions and aggressive marketing fees because they do not have to list the home publicly. It is objectively simpler to transition a piece of real estate to the exact person who is already sleeping under that roof every single night. But you have to look at the hidden financial downsides of that mechanism, because real estate value is entirely driven by open market competition. If a home never gets exposed to multiple aggressive buyers, the tenant has no real way of knowing if they are paying true fair market value. The consumer might think they are getting a massive deal, but they could easily end up overpaying because there are no competing bids to set the baseline. Sure, everyone gets a standard bank appraisal before the loan closes, but an appraisal is just an educated guess until an actual buyer cuts a check. The real target of that original Senate bill was clear: let institutions buy distressed properties and build new construction, but force them out after 84 months. But that 7-year forced sale requirement completely freaked out a massive group of representatives inside the House of Representatives. Roughly 76 members of the House instantly banded together and signed a highly aggressive emergency letter condemning the bill they explicitly called the 7-year forced liquidation clause, a direct socialist assault on the American free market economy. So the House leadership immediately went to work and completely deleted the 7-year sale requirement from their version of the text. By killing that single provision, they instantly stripped the entire bill of its financial teeth and made it completely harmless to Wall Street. If this modified version of the 21st Century Road to Housing Act passes, look at what you are actually left with. As a consumer, you have a piece of legislation that says if you happen to own more than 350 individual single-family properties, you face restrictions. You need to realize that corporate entities owning over 350 homes represent less than half of 1% of all rental buyers in the nation. We are talking about massive multi-billion-dollar private equity funds, not your local mom and pop real estate investors. The average independent investor owns a primary residence, then moves out and turns it into a rental property, maybe repeating that cycle a few times by the time those disciplined individuals reach retirement age. They own 3 or 4 cash flowing rentals alongside their primary home. In my direct personal experience, that is one of the absolute greatest ways for an everyday person to build sustainable multi generational wealth, but that independent wealth creation model is an entirely separate topic for a completely different video on this channel. What is most fascinating right now is how institutional real estate funds are reacting to the newly amended House text. The executives look at the removal of the 7-year forced sale clause and realize the bill is no longer a threat to their business models. They are openly admitting that this highly publicized piece of legislation will change absolutely nothing about how they deploy capital. Now, I already know what some of the cynical blind followers in the comments are going to start typing the second this video drops. They are going to say, Kevin, you run an active real estate tech startup that builds specialized software and buys physical properties, so you are biased. That is completely true because my company builds high-end real estate systems, and we reinvest 100% of our profits back into physical real estate. I am a massive long-term believer in the wealth building power of real estate, and I will continue to accumulate properties for the rest of my life. But there is a massive structural difference between what my company buys and what these multi-billion-dollar corporate funds are doing. My team specializes in buying what I affectionately call hantavirus properties inside the local market we look for. The absolute worst houses on the block that are completely filled with toxic black mold and literal rat droppings properties, where a normal person walking through the front door faces a real risk of contracting a deadly disease and ending up in the hospital. Obviously, I am exaggerating a bit for the camera because we have never actually had a single property with an active hantavirus diagnosis. But the broader structural point stands. The houses we acquire are completely unlivable for normal families in their current condition when we buy these broken fixers. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars completely rebuilding them from the studs up. We finished 2 massive projects exactly like that last year, where the original structures were a complete psychological horror show. When you first glance at the before pictures, you might think the place looks salvageable, but it is an absolute structural disaster zone. We also aggressively build brand new accessory dwelling units and construct fresh single-family homes completely from scratch on vacant land in both of those investment scenarios. Under the new House version of the housing bill, absolutely nothing changes for our business model. Any corporation that actively renovates a severely distressed property or builds a brand new home to increase housing supply is totally exempt. Those entities can still legally hold on to their real estate assets forever, because the 7-year forced liquidation mandate has been completely erased. The House of Representatives officially released their revised legislative text on May 14th of 2022. And that amendment is gone. The entire Congress is scheduled to take a bipartisan vote on this newly modified language on May 18th of 2022. All signs indicate that the final bill will include the House amendment, which completely deletes the original line written by Elizabeth Warren. Her 7-year forced sale rule is officially dead in the water, which means Wall Street funds can buy a broken house and keep it forever. If a massive fund invests millions of dollars into buying a ruined structure and converting it into a clean, functional rental home, they are fine. They are actually adding to the overall housing stock of the country. So the government is going to allow them to hold that deed in perpetuity. Think about the tax math behind this, because after 27 years of ownership, a residential property becomes fully depreciated in the real world. Institutional investors usually sell these assets around the 10-year mark anyway to execute a tax-free 1030 own exchange, so forcing a sale at year 7 was the only thing that actually disrupted their long-term capital gains scheduling. And even though that crucial 7-year penalty has been completely gutted, the bill still contains a massive amount of generic government spending. It includes hundreds of millions of dollars in federal grants designed to help traditional homeowners modernize their current properties. The politicians are promising free money for energy efficient solar upgrades, home insulation, and complete bathroom remodels, though the exact bureaucratic rules for who qualifies for those residential grants are still completely up in the air right now. There are also massive financial grants allocated for converting abandoned commercial office spaces into residential apartments and condos, alongside a fresh wave of first-time homebuyer assistance programs funded entirely by your taxpayer dollars. When you look past the emotional headlines, you realize this bill is actually transforming into a massive stimulative spending package. It is a giant bucket of federal incentives for corporate developers who build new houses and first-time buyers who take on massive debt. The only group that actually gets penalized by this law is the specific type of fund that refuses to do any real construction work we are talking about. The institutions that do not build new homes and do not buy broken fixer-uppers that require heavy labor. Instead, they take massive piles of cash and target move in ready suburban homes that are currently sitting on the traditional market. They aggressively outbid regular everyday families with all cash non-contingent offers on perfectly clean houses. Then they turn around and list those exact same houses for rent the very next day without adding a single ounce of value to the property. That is the exact corporate business model that this bill completely kills. Once a single fund crosses the 350 property threshold, that restriction has zero impact on my real estate operation, because we only buy unlivable structures or build from the ground up Real estate company, which we recently rebranded to Reinvest, is actively focused on expanding the total housing supply for the consumer. But there are massive institutional players out there whose entire strategy relies on draining move-in ready inventory from first-time buyers. So if you hear people talking about the new 350 property restriction, remember the actual mechanics of the law. It strictly stops corporations from hoarding clean move-in ready homes once they cross that specific portfolio size. But if an institution is actively swinging a hammer to fix a broken property or pouring concrete for a new build, they can hold that asset forever. Every single time the government introduces a massive new housing policy, they wrap it in beautiful emotional language about helping the middle class. But in my experience, as a real estate professional, these centralized programs almost never work out the way they are advertised on television. If you found this raw mathematical breakdown helpful, do not be a financial blind follower who gets left behind in this market. Hit that subscribe button right now so you can actually understand the real structural forces moving your money. Thank you so much for tuning into the channel. Today, watch the data keep accumulating high quality assets, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.